Thanks for joining us. And today we're going to talk about Kriya Yoga and the War of Kurukshetra. So in Kriya Yoga, often yogis talk about the War of Kurukshetra, and the War of Kurukshetra comes from the Bhagavad Gita, which is part of the Mahabharata, a Hindu epic that was written by the sage Vyasa. And in the Bhagavad Gita, you have the Pandavas, who are the noble brothers of one particular family, and the Kauravas, who are their cousins and uncles. And the Kauravas are seen as sort of the wicked brothers, the wicked uncles. The Kauravas are basically trying to take the kingdom of the Pandavas. What happens is basically things break down between them in the Bhagavad Gita, and at some point, Krishna, who is the local king, is asked to basically settle the dispute between them. And basically, things don't work out, and the Kauravas and the Pandavas end up going to war. And on the eve of the battle, the Pandavas, especially Arjuna, who is one of the princes, gets the counsel of Krishna how to proceed with the battle. And so basically, the Bhagavad Gita and the war of Kurukshetra is an allegory for the bodily war during meditation. You know, the Lahiri Baba or Lahiri Mahashai has interpreted many Gita passages along those lines. And in subsequent generations of Kriya Yoga, people always reference the Bhagavad Gita. And there are a few things about the war of Kurukshetra that have crept into the minds of Kriya Yogis that do not necessarily serve their best interests. And so the idea about the Kurukshetra war as being a war between the crooked bodily or sense tendencies and the finer perceptions of the soul, and setting up this dichotomy, this conflict between them. And this concept has been interpreted by some Kriya Yogis as basically being a war between the soul and the ego, meaning that one must vanquish the ego entirely. One must annihilate or kill the ego in order for the soul consciousness to thrive. Now, as I said, this sets up a dichotomy, a war, an internal war between what is perceived as noble and true and what is conceived as bad or untrue. And the result of this is that students will often try to annihilate anything that has a concept of materialistic or non-spiritual element to it. And the problem with this is that one can end up repressing things internally, important issues within that need to be resolved but haven't been resolved yet, and they get repressed and pushed down. And so the war, in that case, does not end, it continues. And when Kriya Yogis start to begin to shun anything material, seeing that it is not a reflection of the divine, that it is something that is unholy, you really get into troubles internally. So the idea of a war in meditation is that one is basically trying to either repress, destroy, or deny any distraction from an internal transcendent state. And if you have unprocessed, unresolved issues within you, you may be able to get to a temporary awakening or a temporary transcendence, but you will inevitably be pulled back to needing to resolve the issues. So people become a spiritual yo-yo. They are using their meditation to get a sort of a high, if you will, and then they're pulled back down to the bodily feelings, and they're saying, okay, I'm materialistic again. I need to get rid of this. I need to go beyond the ego. I need to transcend. But they're going to continue to do that up and down unless they deal with those things that need to be resolved. And that's the thing at Modern Kriya, our website, modernkriya.com. We are informed by a Taoist internal alchemy approach. And a crux of that is to create an internal space for transformation to happen. It is not about running away from one's problems. It was about embracing them and setting a stage where we can provide energetic support for those things to resolve, for those issues to resolve. Now, this is a key part of the spiritual path, and many spiritual paths do not have a methodology that resolves internal conflict. They have methodologies for trying to escape the conflict, for trying to transcend it, and Kriya Yoga is very effective for getting into an internalized state. But if there isn't a way for you to process things, what we call the sort of personality, if you will, right? All your likes, dislikes, your past experiences, any kind of things that you're holding on to that are emotionally charged, if you don't have a way of processing that, you're going to hit a plateau in your meditation, and especially if you're using Kriya Yoga, because Kriya Yoga is very effective for getting into this internalized state. But once you get in an internalized state, you basically need something to be able to, a safe space, if you will, to process things. So what's the basic difference between the soul and the ego? Well, we can think of the ego as synonymous with the personality. It's what interfaces from our consciousness with the world in our regular activities. And in many yogic approaches, they see the personality or the ego as something that is dirty, as being an impure reflection of the soul. And the soul as this ascendant or transcendent version of ourselves, our pure self, our true nature. But nothing could be further from the truth. In contrast to many yogic approaches which consider the ego as something being an impure reflection of the soul, something that is dirty, that needs to be discarded, destroyed, or annihilated, in Taoist internal alchemy, we talk about the ego or the personality as being something that is essential for maintaining one's bodily existence. It is necessary and needed, and it has a function. And the personality is an aspect of the universal life force reflected in the 5 phases or the 5 elements. And those elements include things like metal, water, wood, fire, and earth. And the personality really is about how one uses the life force moving through the different phases of the one chi, the one life force. How we use those different phases of the life force to get done what we need to do in this life, to do practical things. If it's to build a house, if it's to find a mate, if it's to learn something. All of these are reflected in how we use our energy in the 5 phases. So none of these things are seen as evil, bad, or an impure reflection of spirit. They are spirit, or the consciousness or the life force reflected in the body. And when we run into particular issues, when we get challenges and things get stuck, the free flow of the life force gets stuck, we talk about these patterns of chi limitation. We have an issue, we have unresolved things from the past that need to be resolved. And we don't see it as a problem, we see it as an opportunity for internal transformation, rather than trying to rid ourselves of impurities, of sin, of evil, because that perspective of seeing the ego as an adversary to the soul is an adversarial relationship. It will pit you against yourself. And so this perspective, which is reflected by some Kriya yogis in their understanding of the Bhagavad Gita and the War of Kurukshetra, is gravely mistaken. If we want internal resolution, if we want spiritual development, we need to open a safe space within us to allow things to resolve, and we need to have the skills to do that. And then the approach that we take, if we take a whole body approach to spiritual development, to enlightenment, then it is really about the integration of the disparate parts of ourselves into a cohesive whole, rather than the eradication of aspects of ourselves that we find objectionable. So we don't go on a witch hunt to try and find the evil within ourselves. What we do is to create a safe space in order for things to resolve internally. This is a holistic approach, an integrative approach to spirituality. So in the Bhagavad Gita and Kriya Yoga, we often talk about the 5 Pandava brothers as being representative of the different chakras. And Arjuna, who has Krishna's counsel, is represented as the Manipura chakra. And the Manipura chakra is in the lower abdominal area. Now, in Taoist internal alchemy, when one is building a energetic space in which to process things, to refine one's energy, and to create what is called a golden elixir, an inner elixir, sort of a spiritual repository, if you will, for helping to support one's spiritual development, that is initially done in the lower abdominal area, right? So creating this safe space. In Taoist internal alchemy, this lower abdominal space is called the dantian, the elixir field. And building up one's energetic center is a very important part of both Kriya Yoga and Taoist internal alchemy. In Kriya Yoga, one does the Navi Kriya, which it helps to activate the area around the navel with the Samana current, right? And in Taoist internal alchemy, we do things like ocean breathing, activating the lower dantian, the lower abdomen, to create this energetic center so we can have a space to process things, right? To resolve things. But when you open up an inner space, when you invite in things that haven't been resolved and you have the energetic support to do it, you can start to do internal transformation that will support your development going forward. You do not have to be in an adversarial relationship with yourself. You do not need to deny yourself, and you do not need to deny the world, because you become functional. The thing about spirituality is it needs to be practical. It's a process of internal transformation and development. But you need to have yourself grounded in your physical reality. And that's the problem with many Kriya Yoga approaches, is that they're trying to escape, right? They're trying to go back to ether, right? Instead of being in earth, like having their energetic center in earth, their body, their bodily experience, and processing things from that perspective, doing the internal transformation in their inner cauldron, if you will, right? Having those internal transformations developing, right? And then things get internally resolved, issues from the past get resolved, things that have to do with your ancestry, etc., become resolved, and then you can go to higher levels in your meditations, and you don't have static, these things that create the problems for you in moving forward, right? Because they have been resolved. Whereas if you take the adversarial approach of the warrior Kurukshetra, you're just basically trying to annihilate anything that distracts you, and that doesn't resolve things, it just represses them. So if you have any questions about this video, feel free to send me an email at info@modernkriya.com. Also check our website at modernkriya.com and our YouTube channel. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.